Teachers who matched with one of their students on Tinder. What's your story? I unmatched with them as soon as I realized who it was. We still had a month left in the semester, and she never brought it up. I teach in higher ed, so it's legal, but definitely not worth the headaches and professional fallout it could potentially cause. One thing some people don't realize is that legal equals ethical or professional. It might absolutely be legal to hook up with someone, but two consenting parties in any situation someone could call into question a power dynamic is just flat out bad news for multiple reasons. I've seen several people tank their careers, or leave a huge black mark on it, by playing this game and losing. My roommate unknowingly matched with a guy who had just graduated from the school where I taught. It was a kind of funny passing comment of "oh, I matched with a guy who graduated from X school." We both assumed that it wouldn't be one of my students because I taught sophomores for the most part and this kid was a graduated senior. So we figured it was a funny coincidence rather than weird. She invited him over to our place to hang out. He walked in and introduced himself before he and my roommate went to hang out in her room and watch a movie. I had to text my roommate that the kid had obviously lied about something because A, he was current senior, not a graduated one, and B, I'd had him as a student in my newspaper class. Turned out he lied about his age, said he was 19, and pretended that he didn't know me despite the fact he had class with me. Nice kid, but he never got invited around again. Lied about his age and pretended he didn't know you. Nice kid. I fear it may have been an act. I matched with one of my online professors last semester. He has a unique name and once I realized who he was I unmatched. Even if it's legal, and at our ages, it would be. It's still a small town and I didn't want to bring the drama on us. I once drunk splurged on Tinder Gold, or whatever the frick it's called, and noticed my current intern had swiped right on me. Yeah, I had to ignore that one for a while, all the while keeping that secret for the rest of semester. Some people swipe fast without pausing long on the pictures. Not Tinder, but teacher related. I had a friend who was up for anything. Flirted with everyone, hooked up with anyone. Give him a dare and he'd do it before you finished talking. Full of crazy ideas and no limits. Any girl could walk up to him and kiss him out if the blue and he'd be on board immediately. Lots of fun and we all assumed there would be nothing he'd say no to. Until one night we all walked into a bar in our early 20s and a girl danced up to him for some close quarters work. Without a pause he immediately turned around, handed his full drink to a stranger, said we're leaving and walked out without turning around to see if we were behind him. After about half a block of fast walking he told us she had been a student of his last year and still attended his school. He teaches grade 10 math. Even though drinking age is only 19 here she obviously got in with fake kid. One of the group made a joke about him getting so freaked out BC he must have been in trouble for hooking up with a student before. And the lecture he rounded on him about taking advantage of kids physically when you're in a position of authority made it clear that he wasn't scared of repercussions. It was his limit. The one thing he wouldn't do, ever. The world would be in a better place if more people in authority shared your friend's viewpoint. I'm a resident and I've matched with a few medical students, but so far none of them have been under me in their rotations. We are there having drinks, as we often do, and he starts telling me that he matched with his 8th grade English teacher, who was 24 when he was 13. Not a crazy age difference. So they chatted and laughed about the coincidence and how weird it was. But they ended up talking for hours about life, how they are both divorced, decided what the heck and agreed to meet at our bar that night. She was there like an hour later. She seemed super fun and looked great for 46. They sat next to me and my wife and we all had fun talking but then they moved to a booth to be alone. 90 minutes and good amount of shots later, they are kissing in the booth. About 10 minutes later, they are paying their tab and ordering a car to the nearest bedroom. It's been about 3 weeks and they are still hanging out. They really like each other. It's kinda creepy but sweet. He seems happier than usual. And I feel like she gets a pass. It was 20ish years ago. I'm sure they barely remember each other. And it's not like they had been interacting since. He's essentially someone who bears a passing resemblance to a student she once taught, given how much changes from 1335ish. If he's happy and she's happy, I say let him have it. Way before Tinder, we had a HS teacher, an older, way older male who taught math, have an affair with a female student. She was a senior that turned 18 at the end of the school year, but they had been together over a year. He and his wife divorced, and he married the 18-year-old. He was allowed to keep teaching, and when she graduated college she was hired as a teacher in the same school in his department. Of course this was in the late 1970s and I graduated in 1982, but I had them both as teachers. My youngest brother, 24, matched up with a seemingly nice girl on Tinder. They started dating afterwards. She was a probation officer for the county and had been doing it for a few years. My brother was and is currently on probation for arson. They were together for about 6 months when they came to dinner at my place, during which I asked her about her job. She told me she is a probation officer. I then asked her if them being together is a problem since he is on probation. She froze for a good minute, then said she didn't know that he was on probation. The rest of dinner was awkward. Couple weeks later, when talking to my brother, he told me that she decided to stay with him, even though it was against the rules for her job. I guess she was hoping they would never find out, but they did less than a week later. She got fired and will probably never work in that field again. My brother broke up with her the next month. He had the nerve to tell me that he broke up with her because she was being lazy, had no money, and was depressed a lot. I told him he was a giant freaking scumbag. I don't think he even understood why she was depressed. He did not feel bad at all and didn't think he was to blame, even a little bit. He is a big piece of crap. Oh wow, that's awful all the way around. What a terrible thing for him to do to someone. I matched with a teacher when I was 27 and she was 76. She said, "I knew you'd make it at least this far," then unmatched me. I found out it was a prank that my friend and my brother was pulling on me. And most of you are right. My brother changed my age range, which I didn't know was possible, to only 55 plus, and they made an account, the teacher account. Sorry to disappoint, but yeah. This story comes from pre-Tinder days, but I'm the product of a student and her second year maths lecturer. Student and lecturer ended up getting married, starting a family and growing old together. But there was some serious fallout. Lecturer's supervisor decided student was a harlot and tried to manipulate the entire maths department into flunking her. When nobody would comply, he kept trying until the day she had to call in sick for her final honors exam. She verbally told supervisor she was in hospital and unable to attend. Supervisor said it was fine and she could make it up when she was well. The next week she rocked up, ready to take the exam, only to be told she'd flunked and there was no second chance to sit the exam. He denied all knowledge of the conversation. Student still managed second class honors, despite all this. Didn't match, but I saw one of my students on Tinder, saying they were 20 when they most definitely were not. I informed the parents that I'd received an anonymous tip that either they were on Tinder or someone was using their photos. Not the story most people are looking for here, I'm sure, but the right thing to do. Yeah, I couldn't masturbate at all to this one. I teach university. A year or so after the end of the class she took under me, she pops up and laughed. I thought there'd be no way she yesed me, so I swiped right for giggles. Instant match. I couldn't believe it. Turns out she wanted to hook up the whole time but didn't want to open that can of worms. We went on a date, and she was by far the worst frick of my life. Animal in bed, oh yeah, starfish. Next time you end up with a starfish, flip her on top. Frick wasting energy on someone who doesn't reciprocate. Make them put in some work. In my district, one of the teachers revealed to his students that he was on Tinder. The students made up a profile, catfished him, and made him believe he was talking to another adult. Then he sent them dong pics which they showed to everyone. Technically, the teacher did nothing wrong because he thought he was communicating with another adult. He is still teaching, but I'm not sure how that works when all of your students have seen your dong. It works if your name is Richard. We homeschool, so my wife says it's never been an experience, much less a problem, but one of her students' father keeps trying to sleep with her and it's getting irksome. Damn it, Bill. I told you to stop trying to cuddle me. I teach your son. It's just wrong. When I was in 6th grade, I had a pretty eccentric teacher who was kind of good looking by teacher standards. She really liked me. Nothing weird happened, but she really took a liking to me because I was kind of an odd kid. I was a super sweet kid, but odd. When I was 21, I went to this bar called Charlie's. It was one of the first few times I'd been into a bar. I was with one of my buddies. I saw her sitting at the bar with a gentleman that looked a little older than her. She didn't look like she was enjoying the date. She was wearing this red dress and was all made up, looking really good. I walked up at an opportune time. Dude went to the bathroom and said hi. Her eyes lit up. She was so happy to see me. She hugged me and I sat where he was sitting. He came back and she barely acknowledged him. After a while he made an excuse to leave. He got the point. Long story short, my 6th grade teacher got the point too that night. The point of my dong, genuinely sorry for that. Long story short, my 6th grade teacher got the point too that night. The point of my dong, genuinely sorry for that. I must say, that last bit makes it really sound like you're, still jailbait. As someone who is actively on Tinder and who works in high schools, it's frightening how often you'll see someone's profile with the age set at mid-20s, but the first line of the profile is actually 16 or something. I have my age filters set to 25-37. Students in high school will set their birth date to something wrong to get around that because there's so many mostly ugly girls who want a sugar daddy and are not afraid to put that in writing. As mentioned above with the first line of profile text, the second line is usually looking for something really sweet or similar. Then finally, 16 photos of bikinis and lingerie. I report every one of them, and if I'm at a school and see the student, I report them to Student Services, the main office. That's kinda horrifying to think about. I really hope that's not as common as your comment would imply. I'm also thinking about how parents these days have so much more coaching to do in terms of safety and privacy. I'm not a school teacher, but here's my story anyways. I am a health and safety instructor and work with a number of organizations teaching them, well, health and safety. I'm teaching at this one location and one of my students and I really hit it off. About a month or so passes and I receive a message from her on Tinder. She asks me if I remember her and I'm thinking to myself, no crap. I had to spend 16 hours pretending not to notice my giant crush on you and actively try to not flirt. So yes, I definitely remembered her. Now it should be noted that I am gay and definitely not out at work, and B, I actively try to keep my personal life to myself, especially to my students. Part of me is freaking out thinking I've literally just been outed and I don't know how to react. So I did the only thing I could think of and said maybe we shouldn't do anything until we figure out what the protocol was. Like, since I'm technically not her teacher anymore, would that still be a conflict of interest? Am I allowed to actually go out with her? Well, we end up going on a date and 6 months later, we're still together. Oh, and she no longer works at that company, so no harm, no foul. Oh, not my teacher, but I matched with a middle school teacher when I was 18. He was hot and about 28. I quickly find out he's dominant. Score. Now we are really talking. He confides in me his favorite kink, schoolgirl. What the frick? Immediate unmatch. Yikes. That's not an ideal job to have when you've got that kink. Please tell me the school didn't have uniforms. I matched with my financial aid advisor on a Cupid my freshman year of college. He was also still a student, but already had his bachelor's and was basically just taking classes because they were so cheap for him as an employee, he said. He ended up being the worst person I've literally ever met. LOL. After dating for 6 months we broke up but were on decent terms, so continued to hang out and hook up regularly. Eventually I found out he had a girlfriend during this time and had also had a baby with another girl during the time we were dating that he never told me about. So I was pretty peeved but basically decided to write him off and move on with my life because I was 19 and frick being some white trash dude's second choice stepmommy for his accidental frick trophy, you know? This dude went frickin' nuclear. He stalked me and threatened to kill me and my family, so I had to get a restraining order against him and he lost his job over it. 2 years later, through a series of super unfortunate events, he assaulted me and attempted to choke me to death. He was ultimately prosecuted but it took over a year and he basically got a slap on the wrist. It's been 5 years since then and he still contacts the few mutual friends we still have every few months to tell them that I've slashed the tires on his car or done something to deface his house or something equally ridiculous. I've been married for 4 years and moved to another state over 1,200 miles away 3 years ago. So yeah, that was like a super lame time. I was hyper vigilant about that when I was teaching in Vietnam. The power dynamic in the classroom was essential for maintaining control, and some of the girls had shown signs that they were interested. No matches occurred. I didn't match with a school teacher, but I did match with a Sunday school instructor. I was 12 and she was in her early 20s when I attended church. I had my age range from 1835. A story I heard from a friend was about a guy just starting his first year teaching out of college. He was in a high school math class or something like that. His first day teaching, he walked into class and saw the girl he had been casually seeing all summer. They had met at a college party, gone on multiple dates, and hooked up occasionally. She had a fake kid and pretended that she was a college student. As a grad student, I work as a TA at my university, and because I teach 4 upper level courses, my students are pretty close in age. 2-4 years typically. I usually try to just swipe left by default on all current and past students, but one made it through. She was an old student of mine, probably by about 1 year. I got the notification, thought about it for a bit, and unmatched. I felt bad about just unmatching without saying anything, so I messaged her on Instagram and just said that I couldn't because she was my old student, and we ended up talking for a bit. Not going to lie, she is beautiful and I was partially hoping she would try to ask me out anyways. I didn't think there was anything wrong since she wasn't currently my student, but I didn't want to be the one asking, and I would have checked with HR first anyways. Afterwards, I looked it up in the university policy, and there was nothing I could find to stop us. So if she does ever ask me out, I will instantly say yes, but I highly doubt it will ever happen. Not a teacher, but in high school a girl in my grade catfished a lunch monitor into sending nudes, and since she was technically underage he was fired and moved to another school. It was a really weird situation TBH, and she got off scot-free. I'm a 26-year-old TA. A few of my students have super liked me on Tinder and Bumble. It's so awkward. I hate it. I'm not ever going to date someone I TA'd for. TA student relationships to me are kind of gross. I could understand it with a few years age difference, but the maturity gap between in college out of college is huge. And if you're just fricking someone, you can frick a lot of people you are not teaching. I had a high school teacher who ended up marrying a student. Not sure when they actually started dating, but they married sometime when she was in her early 20s and him in his early 30s. I remember when they made an attempt to cull the thinly disguised help me jerk off posts on this sub. Seems like it's worse than it ever was now. I'm sure half of this stuff ends up on some kind of literary piece site of some kind. Whatever the frick it's called, lol. Other way around. So, I just turned 18 and was feeling pretty down in the dumps. Most of my friends had already moved into their dorms. On OkCupid you can put down that you're searching for friends, but sometimes it still matches you with someone looking for a partner. I download the app and whatnot. As I'm swiping through I see someone whose name looks vaguely familiar. The profile image was a man in his late 20s conducting a marching band. I thought, oh cool, a musician like me, so I swiped. We were a match. We got to talking about music and how we're both musicians. I do orchestral instruments, and he talks about how he mostly just sticks with band. He offhandedly mentioned how the only time he ever taught orchestra was when he was a student teacher. There was a girl who was like to start, so he was assigned to privately tutor her, and then it dawns on both of us. Actually it hit us like a truck really. That girl was me. He was my favorite teacher and we used to joke around when I was young. And here he was awkwardly coming to the realization that his musician dream girl is really his first student. Luckily we were able to joke about it. He apologized, but it was okay really. We then just started chatting like old friends and exchanged emails. We still chat every now and then. Not exactly a Tinder story, but once me and colleague from work went to high school that was local to our area to pitch a sale to the dean so we can become their paper supplier, and when walking through one of the halls my colleague spotted his GF and asks what she was doing here. At first I thought he was referring to one of the teachers in the hall, but then he said no. She works at some yogurt place after he realized the problem he might be, and he tried to convince himself that maybe she works at the school, but I wasn't buying it. He tried to confront her, but it just got awkward when she said she was late for her Spanish class. That's when he turns to me and defeated says I didn't know, to which I replied that will not hold up in court. Lord be me strength. Not the same entirely, but I teach in a trade school college and ended up dating one of my students. She was one of my older students but still 13 years younger than me. We've now been together 8 years and have a daughter. It was incredibly stressful, not getting caught, keeping such a big secret. At one point I had to find an excuse to get out of proctoring her final exam. Once it finally got out after her graduating, it definitely slowed my career down for a bit. There wasn't much they could do officially, but the dean certainly was annoyed. But I think I've recovered now. It was 100% worth it. Best thing I ever did. So I used to be a student in a 3D art private school. I left in 2014. In 2018 I had a match with a young student there and chatted with her for a bit, but it didn't go anywhere. I was 28. She was 20. Then I got hired as a teacher there. After the first day there I got a message on Tinder from that girl, asking if I was the guy she saw smoking a cigarette outside the school that day. I said yes and we started talking again. She was cute, seemed a bit more interested than last time, and she wasn't in the classes I was teaching. So I thought why not. After a few days I invited her to go see a movie. I arrived on time but she was nowhere to be seen. I sent her a text and she told me she was running a bit late because she was helping some of my students at school. She added that they were saying hi. First red flag. She finally arrived just before the commercials started and then proceeded to tell me how she was friend with many of her teachers. Second red flag. Then, she showed me naked pictures of 2 other teachers she went skinny dipping with a few other students. Super huge red flag. The school had a no relationship between teachers and students policy, so it's safe to say I never invited her on a date again, and politely declined her own invitations. Not me, but my uncle is currently married to his high school French teacher. He was the head boy of the 6th form and had a thing for her, so repeatedly asked to do jobs around her house. Eventually she fell for him and they got together. Was quite the scandal back in the day apparently, but they're still together now. He became a pastor and she moved to a different school and continued teaching. I've had students tell me that they'd match with me on Tinder, but the worst thing was a student messaged me on multiple occasions on Plenty of Fish and even set up a second account when I blocked the original. It was mortifying having to print screen everything and forward it onto my boss. So one of the French at my high school matched with a student on Tinder, but he didn't know her. So the news spread like wildfire within a month. Basically every student knew about and tried to keep her a secret from all the teachers, especially the French one. The teacher traded numbers with the girl and sent BDSM nudes to her, and the nudes were also sent between the students. Around the end of the year the teacher got fired and maybe went to jail, and I think the girl expelled or moved away. I taught a freshman seminar in college just at the tail end of my bachelor's and into my master's degree. While working on my master's I had been receiving Snapchat compliments. You look pretty, you're beautiful, etc. for a while, even though I never responded. Finally I replied because he had been fairly consistent for months, even though I rarely posted. Said I couldn't remember who he was. He said couple years ago when I had Tinder we had matched I guess, and I gave him my snap. Flirted and started dating. Knew he looked super familiar but couldn't place it. Ended up with a weird hunch and checked my old roster. Yup, he was one of my students and suddenly I could remember what he looked like, where he sat in class, etc. Soon after, I told him why he looked familiar. He knew the whole time but didn't say anything because he didn't want to freak me out. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.